What if the thing you've been doing to protect yourself financially is actually the thing that's quietly working against you? Not because you made a bad decision, not because you didn't try, but because nobody ever told you there was a better option sitting right in front of you. Here's what I mean. Most people build an emergency fund, and they should. They save up 3 to 6 months of expenses. They put it somewhere safe, and they feel good about it. That feeling of security, that's real. The work you put in, that's real too. But the place where that money is sitting, that might be costing you more than you realize. Because right now, millions of people have thousands of dollars parked in a bank savings account, earning almost nothing. And every single day that money sits there, inflation is quietly eating away at what it can actually buy you. It's not dramatic. It won't show up on a bank statement, but it's happening. And the frustrating part? The solution isn't complicated. It doesn't require you to take more risk. It doesn't require you to learn a new skill. It just requires you to put your money in a smarter container. That's what this video is about. Not just where your emergency fund shouldn't be, but where it should be, why it matters, and how to actually set it up in a way that works for real people with real lives. I'm Matt. On this channel, I break down money decisions that actually matter. No fluff, no jargon, just clear thinking that helps you build a better financial life. If that sounds like something you need, stick around and consider subscribing. Let's start with something that nobody really talks about. When it comes to your money, where you keep it matters just as much as how much of it you have. Think about it this way. Imagine you have a bucket of water, and every day the sun is beating down on that bucket and the water is slowly evaporating. You're not losing it all at once. You're not even noticing it day to day, but over months and years, you look down and realize there's significantly less than when you started. That's what's happening to your emergency fund right now if it's sitting in a traditional bank savings account earning almost nothing. Here's the number that should bother you. The average traditional savings account at a big national bank pays somewhere around 0.01% interest. That means if you have $10,000 sitting there, you're earning about $1 per year in interest. $1. Meanwhile, the cost of groceries, gas, rent, and just about everything else keeps climbing. So the money is technically there, but its purchasing power, what it can actually buy you, is shrinking, quietly, automatically, without any warning. And here's where most people get it wrong. They think the solution is to just find a higher interest rate, so they open a high-yield savings account, they feel smart about it, and they move on. And look, that's a better move than a traditional savings account, no question. But here's what most people miss. The interest rate on those accounts doesn't stay where it was when you opened it. And what happens to your emergency fund when that rate drops, without you even noticing, is something we're going to get into in a moment. Because the answer changes everything about how you should be thinking about this. But first, let's fix the foundation. The problem isn't just the interest rate. The problem is the container itself. A bank account is a container. A savings account is a container. And most people never question whether that container is actually the best place for their money. They just put the money there because that's what you're supposed to do. That's what their parents did. That's what feels normal. But here's something worth sitting with for a second. The wealthiest individuals in the world, major corporations, universities with massive endowments, large institutions, they don't park their idle cash in a savings account at a bank. They use a completely different kind of container. And it's not because they have access to something secret or exclusive. It's because they understand something most of us were never taught. The container your money sits in determines how hard that money works for you while it's waiting to be used. Think about 2008. When the financial world was falling apart, most everyday people had their cash sitting in bank accounts earning essentially nothing, while the money was quietly losing ground to rising prices. Meanwhile, institutions with smarter cash structures were doing something different. Not something risky, not something complicated, just something better.
Now, I'm not talking about the stock market or anything speculative. I'm talking about a type of account designed specifically to hold cash, keep it safe, keep it available, and earn a meaningfully better return than what your bank is paying you. And the irony is that this account is available to anyone. You don't need a financial advisor. You just need to know it exists and understand how it works. So let me ask you something directly. If you found out there was a place to keep your emergency fund that paid you significantly more interest than your current savings account with similar safety and access, would you move it? Most people say yes immediately, and then they never actually do it because nobody ever showed them how. That changes in the next few minutes. What we're talking about is something called a brokerage settlement account. And before that phrase makes you want to close this video, stay with me. I'm going to explain exactly what it means in plain language. No financial background required.
A brokerage account is something most people associate with investing. Stocks, index funds, things that go up and down and keep you checking your phone at 7 a.m. But a brokerage account is really just a container, just like a bank account is a container. And inside that container, you can hold different things. You could hold stocks if you want, you can hold index funds, but you can also hold something designed specifically for cash. And that's what we're really talking about here. So what does this look like in plain language? Inside a brokerage account, there's a holding area for your cash, a place where your money sits before you decide to invest it or before you withdraw it. And that holding area, depending on the platform, can be set up to earn you a meaningful return. Not because you're investing in anything risky, but because the cash itself is placed into short-term, government-backed instruments that are designed to be stable and liquid. Here's the key difference from your savings account. When you put money in a bank savings account, the bank takes your money, lends it out, and pays you a small portion of what they make. The rate they pay you is whatever they decide to pay you, and when interest rates in the broader economy go down, they lower it quickly, often before you've had a chance to notice. When your cash is sitting in a brokerage settlement account, the return you earn is tied more directly to what short-term government-backed instruments are actually paying. That's a more honest relationship between your money and what it earns. And in a full rate cycle, where rates go up and then come back down, brokerage settlement accounts have historically kept more of their edge than traditional savings accounts. And in a few minutes, I'm going to show you exactly how to set this up at two of the most popular platforms, step by step, no experience needed. But there's something more important than the interest rate, and this is the part that doesn't get talked about enough. Having your emergency fund in a brokerage settlement account actually makes it harder to spend impulsively. Think about what that means for a moment. Your emergency fund's entire job is to be there for real emergencies, a lost job, a medical bill, a major repair you didn't see coming. It's not there for the times you overspent on a trip and your checking account is running low. It's not there for the "I just forgot about that subscription" moments. When your emergency fund is sitting in a savings account at the same bank where you do your everyday spending, it's 2 taps away on your phone. That's a problem. Not because you're irresponsible, but because human beings aren't wired to resist easy access to money when they're stressed or tempted. That's not a character flaw. That's just how we're built. When your emergency fund is in a separate brokerage settlement account, getting to it takes an extra step or two, and that small amount of friction turns out to be incredibly valuable. It means your emergency money actually stays for emergencies. We're about halfway through this video now, and if you're still here, that tells me something. You're not just looking for financial entertainment, you're looking for a better system. And that's exactly who this information is for, people who already have savings and want to make sure those savings are working as hard as possible. What's coming in the second half is where this gets genuinely practical, specific platforms, how they actually work, and the mistakes that even financially careful people still make with their emergency money. But before we get there, and this matters, everything I'm about to walk you through is for educational purposes only. Your situation is unique, and nothing in this video is personal financial advice. What I'm doing is showing you a system. What you do with it is entirely your call. Let's get into the specifics. 2 platforms stand out for this kind of setup: Vanguard and Fidelity. They're different from each other in some important ways, and understanding those differences matters when you're deciding where your emergency money should live. Vanguard first. When you open an account at Vanguard and you send money in,
That money doesn't just sit there in limbo. Vanguard automatically places your cash into what they call a settlement fund, and that settlement fund is already set up to earn interest on your behalf. You don't have to choose it, activate it, or research it. It happens the moment your money arrives. What that means in practice is this. Whatever you send to Vanguard, any amount, any time, it starts earning a competitive return immediately. While it's sitting there waiting for you to decide what to do with it, it's working. And here's the part that surprises most people. You don't have to invest in anything to benefit from this. Pause on that for a second. You can literally send money to Vanguard, leave it in the settlement account, and earn meaningfully more than your bank savings account without buying a single stock or fund. That's it. That's the whole strategy for a lot of people. Now, there's one thing you need to understand about Vanguard. There's no debit card attached to this account. You can't walk into a store and use it like a bank card. If you need the money, you'd request a transfer to your regular bank account, and it typically arrives within a couple of business days. And remember what we talked about earlier. That small delay is a feature, not a problem. Your emergency fund is not supposed to function like spending money. It's insurance. It should be accessible when you really need it, but not so frictionless that it disappears before the actual emergency arrives. Now, Fidelity. Fidelity works on a very similar principle. When you open a brokerage account there, your uninvested cash is automatically placed into a core holding position that earns interest while it waits. Just like Vanguard, it happens automatically. No daily management required. But here's where Fidelity does something Vanguard doesn't. If you want it, Fidelity layers on some light banking features, things like a debit card and check writing capability that you can add to the account. For people who want a slightly more flexible setup while still earning better interest than a standard savings account, this can be a strong fit. Now, you might be wondering, if both platforms automatically put your cash somewhere that earns better interest, what's the catch? There is one, and I'll get to it in just a moment, but it's not what most people expect, and once you understand it, it actually reinforces why this whole approach makes sense. One important distinction between these platforms and your bank. The protection structure is different. Your bank account has a government-backed guarantee, protection up to a certain limit if the bank fails. Brokerage accounts have a different kind of protection through a separate system that covers you if the brokerage itself goes out of business. The two protection systems work differently, and it's worth understanding that before you make any decisions. Here's the plain language version of what that means in practice. The cash holding structures we're talking about, particularly the ones tied to short-term government-backed instruments, are considered among the most stable places you can hold cash outside of a bank. They're not the stock market. They're not speculative investments, but they are structured differently than what your bank offers. That's a real trade-off, not a reason to panic, but a reason to understand what you're choosing and why. Let's be honest about the trade-offs, because this setup isn't perfect for every single person, and understanding who it's actually for will save you from making the wrong move. The biggest trade-off is access speed. If your emergency fund is in a brokerage settlement account and you need the money, it won't be in your bank account within the hour. Depending on the platform and when you request the transfer, it could take 1 to 2 business days. Over a weekend, it might be longer. For a lot of people, that sounds alarming at first, but think carefully about what real emergencies actually look like. If you lose your job, you probably don't need money in the next 4 hours. You need money over the coming weeks and months as you navigate what's next. If your car breaks down and needs a major repair, you typically have at least a day before that bill comes due, and often longer. If a medical bill arrives in the mail, it's almost never a situation where you need to pay it the same afternoon you open the envelope. Real emergencies have a little bit of lead time built in. The situations that require money within the next 60 minutes, those usually aren't emergencies. Those are cash flow problems. And cash flow problems should be handled by your checking account, not your emergency fund. So here's the question worth asking yourself right now. When was the last time you actually needed your emergency fund within the same day? If the answer is never, or if you've never had to use it at all, then the 2-day access window probably isn't the limitation you think it is. Now, let's talk briefly about Schwab because it comes up a lot. Schwab is a solid platform for investing, but for this specific strategy, it works differently than Vanguard and Fidelity. At Schwab, your cash that's sitting in the account doesn't automatically go into something that earns competitive interest. By default, it goes into a basic holding account that pays very little, closer to what your local bank pays. If you want your Schwab cash earning better interest, you have to go in manually and move it yourself. That's doable, it just takes more active management, which is why for a true set-it-and-forget-it approach to your emergency fund, Vanguard and Fidelity tend to be the cleaner options for most people. Now, the 3 mistakes that financially disciplined people still make with their emergency funds, because this isn't only about where the money lives. The first mistake is mixing emergency money with everyday spending money. When those 2 pools of money live in the same account or even at the same institution, the line between them gets blurry fast. That's how a real emergency slowly becomes a series of inconvenient moments that didn't actually need emergency money. The second mistake is chasing the highest possible interest rate at the expense of access. Your emergency fund has one priority above everything else: be there when you need it. Interest is a bonus. If you're moving your emergency money into something that limits your access just to squeeze out a slightly better return, you've missed the entire point. The third mistake, and this one is subtle, is setting up the emergency fund once and never checking on it again. People open a high-yield savings account, feel good about the decision, and never look at what they're actually earning again. Rates change. Account terms change. The setup that was working well a couple of years ago might not be performing the same way today. In the next couple of minutes, I want to leave you with one idea that pulls all of this together. Because the real question here isn't just where to keep your emergency fund. It's how to build a system around your money so that the right decisions happen automatically without you having to think about it every single day. Here's something worth thinking about. Money habits are fragile. They depend on you being in a good headspace, having enough time, not being stressed, not being overwhelmed by everything else happening in your life. And let's be honest, there are plenty of days when none of those conditions are met. Systems are different. A system works whether you're paying close attention or not. A system doesn't care if you had a brutal week or if you haven't checked your accounts in 3 months. It just keeps doing its job in the background. That's the real argument for keeping your emergency fund in a brokerage settlement account. Not the interest rate, not the specific platform name. It's that you're building a system where the right thing happens automatically. The money arrives, it goes into the settlement account, it starts earning interest, you don't touch it because it's not linked to your everyday spending. It doesn't feel like spending money because it lives in a separate place with a separate purpose. And when a real emergency hits, and eventually one will, the money is there. It's meaningful, and it hasn't been quietly chipped away by a combination of zero interest and impulse spending over the years. Think about what that means over a 10-year period. If your emergency fund sits at a traditional bank earning almost nothing for a decade, you've paid a slow, invisible cost for the privilege of feeling secure. The number on the screen looks the same as when you started, but what that number can actually buy you is meaningfully less. If instead that money has been sitting in a brokerage settlement account earning a competitive return for those same 10 years, you've used the waiting time productively. The emergency fund still has one job, but it's been doing that job while quietly working for you in the background at the same time. That's not complicated. That's not risky. That's just a smarter container doing a better job. Now, here's what I want you to actually do before you close this video. Not open an account, though that might be exactly the right next step for you, but look at where your emergency fund actually lives right now. Not where you think it lives, where it actually lives. What institution, what type of account, and what interest rate it's earning. Pull up the account, look at the number. Most people set this up once, felt good about it, and never looked at it again. Because here's what becomes clear when you pay attention to this stuff over time. The gap between people who build real financial security and people who stay stuck isn't income, it isn't intelligence. It almost never comes down to a single big decision. It comes down to whether their money is sitting in the right containers, doing the right jobs, in a system that works even when they're not actively managing it. Your emergency fund is not just backup money. It's a direct reflection of how seriously you're taking your own financial future, and it deserves to be in a place that actually respects that.